originally from Pakistan. I identify as a gay man. I'm a research scientist at Cardiff University, investigating infectious diseases in animals. I'm also the treasurer for Glitter Cymru, which is a LGBT plus group for ethnic minorities. So my experience of immigration is as a tourist, it is as a student, so an student obviously, and as someone who's claimed asylum as a gay man from a country where being a member of the LGBT plus community is a criminal offense, and now as a refugee. And I'm very pleased that I'm joined by two other members of Glitter Cymru. So that's a little lightning tour of who I am. And what I'm hoping to do is not only talk about my lived experience, but also try to depoliticize the conversation around immigration as a scientist and talk about the sort of the journey of human evolution as one that is so full of migration. In fact, all of human beings wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for some form of migration. So I'm hoping to talk about it in a more sort of scientific, broad perspective. I'm so happy to be here today.
Thank you very much, Numair, for that. And my apologies for not having introduced that tonight is, of course, in partnership with Glitter Cymru. And we're very, very proud of that. And again, thank you, Numair, for joining us. And of course, your two colleagues as well. Who would like, perhaps it'd be easier if I just go down my screen. And if you'd like to take this opportunity, you can. Jiawei, you're next on my screen.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. So my name is Jiawei, and I was an international student from the University of South Wales. So I came from Malaysia, which has a very interesting demographic actually, because we are a multiracial, multicultural country. For some reason, even though I was born Malaysian, I am ethnically Chinese, and we still have a bit of a immigrant, migrant kind of situation in Malaysia where we are still not considered 100% Malaysian to some because of my ethnicity. So I would like to discuss a bit of that in this panel as well. And currently I am working in the University of South Wales as a graduate intern. And I'm a migrant in terms of, as Numair said, international student and also a backpacker around the world as well. So I really hope I can contribute my views to this panel. And last but not least, I'm also part of Glitter Cymru. So Numair and Abdul Mujib are also part of Glitter. So we are really happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And coincidentally, Mujib, you're next on my screen. I think you're muted, Mujib.
Hey, everyone. So my name is Mujib Yahya. I'm from Nigeria. Nigeria is a country in the west of the African continent. So in Nigeria, I'm from the old Gala kingdom, which is now known as Kogi State. Some part of it is now known as Kogi State. I'm not going to take too much time. I just want to tell you guys more about where I come from in terms of the Gala kingdom in Nigeria. So we speak the Gala language, and there's over 1 million Igala speakers. It's a Deafioid language, which is under like a Benue Congo languages in the segment. So Benin Kingdom, which is a more popular kingdom than the Igala Kingdom, is close to the Igala Kingdom, so they're neighbors sharing commerce and trades together. There was even facts that they had a dispute at one time, a civil war, and the Benin Kingdom had to ask help from the Portuguese soldiers, Portuguese missionaries to defeat Igala, which was the ruler of the Igala people then. So Nigeria is a very big country. It's like one of the most populated countries in the African continent. And it's no surprise because many of us believe it's three countries put into one. So the Biafran Kingdom as one country, the Oduduwa Republic as another country, and the Northern Nigeria as the third country. So it's a known fact that Lord Frederick Lugard, who is a British soldier, in January 1st, 1914, he signed a document to merge them together, so three parts of Nigeria to become one, and this to benefit the British economy at that time. A lot of lives were lost just because of this, because people didn't It's like so many different people, diverse. There's over 500 languages in Nigeria. So imagine bringing all these people, forcing them together with all their differences. Differences is good. Like it's even noted in the Quran, in the holy books, that I've given you these differences so you know yourself, so you learn about yourself, you know, not so we fight against each other, but yeah, they just merge people together to make this country. There's even evidence that Lord Frederick Luger stayed in the northern part of Nigeria while he was there, and he's in Gala Kingdom, which is where I come from, which I only just found out, got to know that. There was no information given to me growing up about this. I only get to find out traveling, migrating out of Nigeria. So it's very interesting, something I'd like to know more about. So as the population in Nigeria is massive, so is the population of people that have migrated from Nigeria, living elsewhere in abroad, which includes myself. Of course, there's various reasons for people migrating. I've come to realize some of them as well during my lived experiences, living in the UK and living in Nigeria. So that's why this dialogue is quite interesting for me as well, just to speak about what I think affects me as well during my migration. And thanks, David. Also, I'm part of Glitter Cymru, as Jia mentioned earlier. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Majid. That's fascinating and really interesting. I learned a lot there as well. And I'm sure some of the questions will get into that, you know, and that history and the knowledge that you have of your own culture and who you are. I think that's enviable for many, I have to say, to know so much about yourself. Okay, so next I've got Rosilda.
So, hello. My name is Rosilda. I am a bachelor in business administration. I work nowadays at GREC in Aberdeen, North Grampian Regional Equality Council. That is an organization that promotes support to individuals from the minority groups in many projects. My project in specific, it's a translation and interpretation service. So we provided support, language support for individuals to access the healthcare and the social service in whole Grampian area. I come from Brazil, so I am a grandchild from immigrants. And in my middle, over my third, when I was already 33 years old, I migrated to Italy. And then from Italy, I came to Aberdeen as what they call here, I think that will be like EEA family member. So my husband is a researcher and was invited to come to Aberdeen University to contribute it for a project. And in the beginning, this contribution is supposed to be 1 year. And then sadly, or happily, you know, who knows, we just, he was invited to stay and we decided to move on the whole family here. So basically, as I usually to work in multinationals in charity organizations in my country of origin. And when I came here, I was the one invited to come. So I needed to make my path and started, you know, to integrate it in the community. And I face, like, as an immigrant, many challenges, be overqualified, be underqualified for positions, and I was kind of frustrated because when you are someone who follow a partner or someone in a specific, you needed to adapt it in so many ways. You know, you needed to adapt it to the language, to the place, and you wanted as well to find the right place to be. Was like very hard, I will say. Then I thought, you know, I can't like stay at home and they speak Italian and Portuguese the whole day and not learn anything, or I can put myself there for the challenge and take whatever comes across and just embrace. So I got my first job working as a kitchen assistant in a kitchen in a school. And from there, I met like wonderful people that, you know, was like, I will say very helpful to say, what are you doing here? You are in the wrong place, or, you know, what's wrong, what you can do to help. And of course, you know, as I said, I was already like 34. So the way to escape from this kind of trap that I was to go back to university and do a course here to update my skills. And then the whole flux took me to Grec to be a volunteer. And then, a member of staff. I work with many, many women and men who come to join with their partners or just came here and decided to change their careers because they were overqualified for the positions that they had a degree in their original country, and they were like overqualified for simple positions that they were applied. So during all these years I have been, I met doctors, dentists that came to join their partners and unfortunately could not work in UK, even if there is like a gap for this sort of professions here. And then they use their skills, their language skills to be part of this community and help and support it and created like a new profile or a new profession. I don't have like a political background. I had like bits and bobs with migrations here for family reasons or personal reasons. And I'm very happy to be here today and, answer any question.
Thank you very much, Zilda, for that. That was interesting. And again, I'm sure a lot of what you said will probably be echoed by some of the other community champions this evening as well. Next, I've got Ivan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ivan, and I'm Italian. I am a social anthropologist by work. But the last job I had here was as a community liaison officer for Aberdeen Harbour expansion here in Aberdeen. Before the pandemic, then I lost the job, so I'm basically unemployed at the moment. I moved to Scotland in 2016, almost 5 years ago, which means that I have pre-settled status, and I will be able to apply for a settled status in May, and after that for citizenship, for UK citizenship, I think in one year after. So that's my current condition. I can say something about migration from three perspectives. The first is personal, as I just mentioned. It's probably the least straightforwardly migratory, because I wouldn't call myself a migrant. There is something to me about migrating that is not only about living, but also about resettling somewhere in a at least potentially permanent way. But my experience is just that of a person who has traveled. I've traveled for work, for study, for research, as an exchange student, for leisure. So this is just, I think, one step. I might be somewhere else in a year or two, or go back maybe to Italy. Maybe that's not very likely, but yeah, for several reasons. Another way I can say something about migration is through my father's experience. He is Iranian. He came to Italy in the 70s, and through him, I had kind of a vicarious experience of what really migration is, because he was maybe 17 or 18. He went to Italy to study, and spent there like the past 50 years. And I could observe how being a migrant has changed over the years, of course. He used to send letters and call home maybe once every month, once a month or two. Now, obviously, technology has changed the experience of being a migrant, as many other things in our lives. The third way I can say something about migration is my research. As I mentioned before, I'm a social anthropologist. I did research on migration, return migration in the Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Georgia. And that's the probably deepest way I've experienced migration, or actually even something more than migration, such as deportation, forced relocation. So all this idea of forced mobility and how other things come into play in this. So when we talk about migration, we talk about citizenship, our status within a society, within a legal system. And sometimes when this system shifts, changes, then we change our status without actually moving at all. Like we can become migrant or suddenly, you know, less secure in our position within a society, just because law and other things change around us. And this is happening with Brexit now, of course, which is a big topic. I think we can talk about at length. So I mean, yes, that's me.
Thank you very much, Ivan. And again, yes, I know you're acutely feeling it, and of course it will be interesting to hear from you as well, the impact that Brexit has had and potentially will have on you as well in terms of the process. Next on my screen is James, last but not least.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody. I am now a retired mechanical engineer from the oil and gas. I'm originally from Brazil, despite my name. And Brazilians are probably one of the most diverse countries in the world because we were made from immigrants from all over the place, including the local natives that already existed there when the Portuguese landed on the Brazilian shores in the 1500s. My father was English, and he was a true migrant. He ended up in Brazil. That was after the Second Great War. He was one of the very few that was actually on the age bracket that couldn't serve. So he missed action, thankfully. And right after the Second World War, he did his apprenticeship and studies in electric and electronics, and then he eventually migrated to Brazil with, at the time, Western Telegraph is more known today as Cable and Wireless. And then in Brazil, met my wife, and the plans to come back to the UK never materialized. So I understand from experience at home what a migrant is, although it's several decades ago. However, in my own experience, I've traveled many countries. Most of the travel was done for work, either work requirement or opportunity. And I have experienced many issues visually and by people telling me and relating to people from all sorts of nationalities. I do have a understanding of what this traveling body of people around the planet is, and for all sorts of reasons. I happen to be at one possibly end of the scale of the moving population on the planet. I hope to contribute with the experiences I've had, what I have observed, what I have experienced personally myself. Yes, thank you for inviting me and having me here.
Thank you very much, James. And thank you all for introducing yourselves. So as you can see, we've got quite a diverse group of people, but all with experience of migration in some sense of that word. And really tonight is about analysing that word and thinking what it means to people and their own lived experiences. Now, just as a word about tonight's event, I should have said it already, but I haven't, so I'll do it now. Everything that's mentioned tonight, this is a safe space, so please do not share. You're welcome to post on social media that you're here and that you're enjoying it, that speakers are inspiring, all these types of things, but please don't post anything that you hear tonight about people's own lived experience. As you can appreciate, sometimes it can be difficult to share lived experience, and we trust that everyone will keep this a safe space. So without any more further ado, I will go to the very first question. So the very first question is quite topical. It's something which has impacted us all around the world in some sense. And I'm very interested to hear how it may have impacted on you and your lives. how has COVID-19 affected you? And please, to the community champions, please feel free to just come in whenever you like. I'm not going to ask it to anyone specific, just anyone who'd like to contribute first.
Do you mind if I go first, just to continue the circle we started with? What I found really interesting actually about COVID is something that I think we've all learned, is when it comes to restrictions for traveling, typically something that has been restricted to certain types of individuals now has become such a global phenomena for people who have historically had a lot of privilege. They haven't had any restrictions to travel. Now people who've had a great deal of privilege, so for example, white privileged people who've had the opportunity to travel all over the world without having to apply for the visa, now that there are bans for traveling because of a global pandemic due to anthropogenic activity, people are beginning to realize what it feels like to be told, no, you cannot travel. And suddenly people are complaining because they couldn't go to some fancy island and party over there. And, and people still haven't quite come to appreciate that is how people like myself have had to feel when I had to travel to the UK. Just as a tourist, I had to prove that I'm not a terrorist, just by virtue of being from a country that has experienced that, unfortunately. So, and as well, so that is a sort of an interesting irony that I learned, is that now more people are appreciating what it feels to be restricted, as well as realizing the importance of community level support. And as someone who is the treasurer of a community group, I realize the value of being there for your community, even if it's something simple like saying, look, every week we're going to talk to you because you are locked down. Now more than ever, I think we've realized the importance of having a community and being there for a community. And I've learned to appreciate my community as a member of the LGBT+ community and as a member of an ethnic minority community now more than ever. So I'd just like to start with that, but I'm sure we can explore more themes there.
Definitely. I think that's a very good point, actually, Numair. And again, you're touching on privilege there as well, and that's something that we're keen to discuss tonight. Would anyone else like to come in after Numair?
Yeah, actually, coming from Numair's perspective, I had to make a very big decision last year whether to go back to my country before, we don't know whether the borders are closed or not. And so as an international student on their last year of study, I had to make a decision within 2 days on whether to, migrate back to my country or stay here in the UK to find a job. And it was a tough decision to actually think, okay, should I do it now and come back to the UK? Will UK close its borders, or will Malaysia close its borders? And so I can see also, on behalf of my friends, even those living in Europe, they are faced with the challenge of thinking whether they need to go back and stay there God knows how many months, or stay here in the UK and wondering if their visa would expire or not. And I think these are the things which migrants, I would say, or international students have to face, in which, again, that's where privilege comes in the home country stance, where home students can, just go back to, let's say, England or Wales or Scotland, even when locked down, but we have to make a major decision on whether to make, difficult or different life choices in a very short span of time or not. So it is pretty interesting, this COVID dynamic for nationalities, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Joey. And again, just the sheer weight of that decision. I can't imagine how that must have felt and how that must have been. And again, I suppose the question, perhaps we can ask this, but do you think that politicians are truly thinking about the experience of migrant communities when they are making these decisions? I mean, it asks the question, doesn't it? I don't know if anyone else would like to come in on how COVID has perhaps impacted them, or even off the back of Numair or Jawe's points.
Yeah, I'm gonna mention how it affected me myself. Yeah, just to say also that I saw asylum in the UK, um, and my asylum process took about 3 years. So up until 2019 November, I was allowed to given a leave to remain in the country, residency. And so 5 years leave to remain in the country. So that was in November 2019. So just a couple of months before the pandemic started. So so it was quite difficult to really integrate into the community from then. With everything mainly shutting down, and I had to leave the asylum accommodation that I was in 28 days. So just really looking for somewhere to stay. It was quite difficult in that times, and types of work as well. There was really a shortage of work, like a lot of people experienced. Uh, Apart from that, I think I've been actually lucky enough with the pandemic in terms of not losing any family or close ones, and but using myself as an example, the community in terms of the asylum seeking community, refugee community in Cardiff, Wales, where I live. I just thought like I had lot, a lot other people would have suffered a lot more. Something that I will mention during our talk. I said I found it more lucky because of um, I got extra help, some things during my asylum process where a lot of other asylum seekers didn't do and wouldn't know about. So that's how I end up getting much easier during the pandemic to later find a place. Although it was a bit of inconvenient, very difficult, but I thought I was much lucky than others. Thanks.
Something about claiming asylum, because there's
Of course.
And I'm sure Mujib, you can talk about this as well, because of course I consider you a close friend, but certainly as someone who has privileges. So I'm someone who has a certain level of education, a certain way. So I understand, I'm aware of my privileges, that when I claimed asylum, when I went for my asylum interview, it was relatively straightforward. Now, just to give you an example of how one system can disproportionately affect different people. Now, I was in effectively an enclosed room where I should not have been able to hear the questions that the interviewer was asking in the adjacent room, but I could clearly hear him yelling at someone for whom English was not their first language. Now, if English is not your first language, speaking at a higher octave won't make it so. So that to me was clearly unprofessional, and I should not have been able to hear it. And I could tell that my interviewer was cringing. So, it is this system that a lot of white British people think is helping people, and I completely agree with you, that it isn't quite what people think it is. We're just about saying, we let you survive. But that is not enough. That is not humanitarian enough. And certainly what I would like to say is that, this idea that you're only allowed to get, I think it's about £30 a week, approximately, £30 a week. So I was claiming asylum with my ex at the time. And I chose to support him because I'm like, there's no way. And that was a lot of pressure for me, which meant that I had less resources for myself. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to let you survive on that. Like, that's absurd. That is absolutely absurd. And that it is not okay by any stretch of the imagination. You simply cannot justify that. And I certainly would not have let that happen for my ex. And, I wouldn't want that for my worst enemy, frankly. So, yeah.
I think that's exactly it, Namer, right? I'm talking from a massive position of privilege, right? I'm white, heterosexual, Scottish born. A lot of the way the media actually portray the asylum system, you're right. It's portrayed through a lens of white savior, right? Where, we're helping all of these people, and, we're also good because we give X amount of foreign aid and all these types of things. And, it brings up a really important point, actually, hearing from yourselves who have lived experience in that system. And that's around terminology and around how the wording is, right? And you know, we've mentioned a number of different words tonight. We've used asylum seeker, we've used migrant, we've used international student. You know, there's been a lot of different words with relation to migration in a sense. And I'm very interested to know what you all think of the words that are used.
I mentioned something about that earlier, and I think Ivan as well did mention something that has been on my mind as well in terms of the meaning of migrant migration. I don't think they're portrayed in the media as they should be. You know, I think the true meaning of the word have been lost in a lot of labels. For example, people fleeing conflicts from a third world country coming to a more developed country to seek refuge. Immediately their migrant status is changed. They become asylum seekers. And after that, asylum seekers, you become refugee and maybe go on to become a citizen or a resident in that country. And the whole migration part of it just get missed in the whole circle. And I think it's important for people to just realize that and notice it. And yeah, that's what I think. And just to commend, just to say, Adebolaji, you're a true champion, community champion, all the things you're doing. And yeah, I'm a dad of one as well. Got 4 years old. With our circumstances as well, it's really tough. And to come out doing this, what we're doing now, yeah, you need to really pat yourself in the back once in a while, because we tend to forget. Yeah, that's what I think.
Sorry, could I just quickly add one sentence, actually, that I think is so important here. The only difference, the difference between a migrant and a non-migrant, strictly speaking, is a piece of paper. The only difference between us and a white UK individual who's against migration is a piece of paper. Prick us, we bleed the same color. And it is so absurd to me, and I don't know how you can rationally justify that. The only thing that separates us, people who are not migrants, is a piece of paper. And that's something worth keeping in mind for today's conversation.
Well, I would like just make a comment. For example, not like personally, but I have friends that had their children born here, so they are British citizens. But very often what you listen, like members of the community ask it, it's where you are from. No, I am from UK. No, where you really are from. That it's kind of so offensive in many layers, because you come, your parents came here, joined into this community, working hard, pay taxes, every single one, British or no British, with a paper to be here or not a paper to be here. And then you're born here, and sadly, you don't carry like, you are not like from here, where you really, really, really come from. It is so, I think that these subtle things, because I think that for a asylum seeker, a refugee, or, a EEA family member, or now for a European that it's coming to live in UK, you can like deal with the fact that they needed to box you in some place. You arrived here, let me put you inside a box. Let me see what kind of migrant or immigrant you are. Let me see. But when you put your roots here and you try to raise your family, I think that it's so kind of offensive, in many layers, that people often, when you arrive in the airport, so what brings you here after like 20 years living here in UK soil? Oh, okay, you scan my passport. I think that you know that I live here. What's the point to ask it? It's not like a business trip or like a vacation thing. I have my children here, so why you wanted to ask it where you really, really come from? So I don't know if it match with anything, but I just, every single, there is like a need in the society to just box at us every single one of us, white, black, migrant, no migrant, bisexual, heterosexual, anything. But as you said, we are humans, we are individuals, we are the same, equal. So there is no need to try to box us or to label us, as well as I usually to listen people say, no need to label what exactly that one is, why you come, why you're here, or things like that. So I think that it's very offensive for many of us that spend more than half of our lives here. That is a choice, I think. For some of us, I will say for my case, it's a choice to be here. That sometimes I hear people very talking about Brexit and be worried and concerned, who I will be here, can I stay here? And my husband, as an Italian, was someone that in the past usually to be very afraid about us, if me and my children could stay here. And I always take, I came here is an option. If they wanted me, I am fine to be. If not, I am happy to go any part of the world.
Just to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, Rosie. Actually, say it was your choice to come here, and it's interesting to see how many people have ideas about the meaning of migration. Like I said, the word itself is almost lost its definition. Like some people mentioning that if they hear migration, they think of a backpacker just going across the world. Well, I'm just going to use the animal term of it in terms of flocks of birds migrating from somewhere in Africa, migrating to somewhere in the western country. Okay, it's either they live in that part because maybe climate change, which is not a good thing. The climate around them has changed and they can't habitate where they used to be able to habitate. They probably need more food. So this is another reason why people migrate as well. And one thing we need to know about migration, even this we show in terms of the animal side of it as well, in terms of when they migrate to somewhere new, they tend to enrich that place. It's either with their feces, with whatever they do, with them breeding. They tend to enrich that place, make it more better. So I believe this, or even in human migration as well, this is what it's all about. I mentioned migration, the word has been forgotten. It's been forgotten by the actual migrants as well, in terms of not being proud of their migration and their migration status. So like migrants themselves living in a foreign country should really know themselves. If someone is calling you an asylum seeker, say, I'm not an asylum seeker, migrant. If someone is calling you a refugee, I'm a migrant. I'll give people reasons and just always talk in any opportunity you have. Also, the government plays a massive part of it. I think someone mentioned earlier, with this savior mentality they want to have, like this white savior mentality, thinking, oh, let's not class these people as migrants, even though they migrated from somewhere and they're actually adding to the community. Oh, let's not class them as migrants. Let's class them as asylum seekers. Let's class them as refugee. More, which are labels that are more, I would say, more patronizing, and be like, oh yeah, I've got aid from this for refugees and things like that. So yeah, I just think people as well really forget the reason why they migrate. In terms of myself, like Adebolaji has mentioned as well, the inhuman treatment of people in my country, Nigeria, is always in the high. Nigeria is well known for its corruption. Just recently, last year, for the first time in a very long time, people went to protest on the road due to the brutality of the police force. So there was a civilian killing at that time. And the protesters ended up getting shot by the Nigerian military. You see, so that's kind of treatment. Me, myself, growing up, I grew up with my 4 siblings and my parents. So we're living in a bed seat. I didn't even know it was called a bed seat until I traveled that. So that's just, in my opinion, violation of your human right. And in that bed seat, 6 people with bed, we're sleeping on top of each other in a compound of over 60 people, and you share in one toilet. There's a name that we call it. It's called face me, I face you. So you're up in a row. There's houses facing each other. That's where it gets the name from. And each house is one bed seat. Not houses. Each bed got family living in there. So those kind of situations will let anyone want to leave a country like that to go somewhere else, especially coming from the country where a lot of people wants to attain a better life. You see. So again, when I'm saying we migrants, we forget ourselves as well, because when you end up coming to a country, maybe you migrated not from your own choice because of some bad treatment from your country. So when you get to a better country, a developed country that is doing things better, you should not forget to learn and try and take things back to where you migrated from, to let that place be more better and advance as this place you are now. Because if you're enjoying what you have there, you should want it for people there. You might have migrated, leaving everything behind. You don't have any more family there, but this is where you come from. This is like your heritage. So I think people should always have that at the back of their mind as well, wherever they are. Yeah, I'll just leave it right there.
Thank you, Mujib. And again, another massively important point. I mean, brain drain is something that, you know, you're right. You're completely right. And, you know, it's about creating those opportunities to go back, isn't it? And I think in a lot of the cases. Ivan, I'm aware that you've been trying to jump in a couple of times.
So, maybe I should press the button here for raise hand. Yeah, I just want to say that, yeah, Mujib mentioned this, the fact that migrating feels more like something you want to say about birds, you know, flocks of birds. So for people, I would think, you know, migration is more like a means to an end. And in my work too, when I write anything about you know, my ethnography and anthropology, I try normally to avoid the word itself. I prefer, I don't know, to call the people I met during my fieldwork and with whom I worked as friends or acquaintances and research participants. Yeah, but there is anyway. Yeah, in scholarship too, like the word migrant is still there. I mean, I'm not sure we can do without, but there is a tension, I think, there, like something to sometimes it can be overcome in favor of other things.
Thank you for that, Ivan. Oh, Namer, on you go.
Well, I mean, if you're going to ask us another question, I may just sort of integrate what I'm going to say in that. So actually, I will be quiet and I'll wait for you to ask another question.
Okay then. So I'll ask another question then as you ask. So the next question, of course, tonight was really, and we've spoken quite a lot around some of the difficulties that many of you have faced for perhaps different reasons, but nonetheless difficulties that you've faced. And we had a question in the chat as well. Not the chat, sorry, from the Q&A. Following on from Numer's last point, ironically Numer, so you can perhaps tie this quite well. I assume what they're speaking about is the point where you overheard the person, the interviewer, shouting at the person hoping to claim asylum. How to combat this issue whereby authorities don't want to pay for an interpreter or just don't know they have to. And this links exactly to what I was wanting to ask next anyway, and that's around, do you think there is enough support available for difficulties, for example, with interpreting or with housing or with financial support as well?
So, I mean, I'll quickly jump in. So I've been quite lucky that my parents have supported me, but through my activism, I've supported a lot of people who've had no parental support. They've had no support from back home. So for instance, I've helped a trans man. I've helped a lot of people in court as a witness who've had interpreters with them, and I've supported them in their claim for asylum, because I think it's so important that I have certain privilege. Certain privileges that I've had are my education, my ability to read, English. So I've tried to give back to the community, but I've certainly witnessed firsthand how the process of claiming asylum is really challenging, because of course, if you're someone who doesn't have the privilege of formal education and can't speak English, then actually speaking to people who can only speak English to try to find you in an interpreter becomes rather paradoxical and challenging. So, you know, it's one of those catch-22 situations that I feel the only way that we'll actually be able to solve that is to have people within the legal department who are specifically focused on individuals who are claiming asylum, and actually have a department for interpreters, because presumably a lot of the people who will be claiming asylum are people for whom English is not their first language. And also, just very quickly, it's not just the language barrier, but colorism as well. So for example, my ex-partner and I, we claimed asylum together, but my claim was processed much faster, because of course I was, you know, I'd done my bachelor's, my master's, and I was starting my PhD. So even if they couldn't legally throw me out of the country. They couldn't. So, you know, it was interesting that he didn't have that privilege, and his claim was much longer.
And I wonder, just, I saw Rosilda want to come in, but just before that, Rosilda, if it's okay, I'd like to go to James, because James, I remember in our briefing session, you spoke quite passionately about this and the fact that you hadn't faced a lot of these barriers, because when you were migrating across countries and moving to countries, it was with work, it was with business, right? So I think you described that as having an infrastructure already there to support you. And I'm particularly interested to hear, of course, a bit more about that, but also if you think anything could be learned from that infrastructure that you speak about in terms of moving into, you know, if that was a governmental approach, for example, do you think anything could be learned from that approach?
Well, there's many things in there. So we would almost have to unpack everything that you have said. And the answer to your question is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that when you are traveling with a corporation and you are going with a work mission, there is a big interest that all the process to move in, get you settled, and get you doing what you do for a living is done as seamless as possible. And evidently the corporations have their contacts and their contacts at high levels, and everything then is sorted. To answer your question, absolutely, yes. You, at certain parts of it, you feel more that you are being transported rather than traveling. There is that element into it. You get to some places and there are people expecting you, and then is seamless. However, that is not all. It will happen on certain occasions, but there are other instances where that is not the place, which doesn't stop the need for the business to continue, and then you are more or less on your own. And in certain cases, yes, you do face quite a little bit of hardship, depending on who you come across, and it could be an immigration officer that has had a bad day, that had a bad experience in his life, looks at me, automatically profiles, and me a really hard time. May have had history, that there is hard feelings, and that has happened to me. And what I did learn is that the last thing that anybody should do, irrespective of what were the circumstances that led you into that position, is don't ever be confrontational, ever. It doesn't take you anywhere. And surprisingly enough, the place that I got treated with most disrespect, so to speak, was the United States. So one would have thought, what? And then you see somebody looking like you with a British passport, and they are going to treat you with disrespect. And yes, that's what it was. What I still don't. Well, I have a little bit of an idea what set it off is because my work visa would expire in a week, and the company had me do a business travel, and I warned them. I said, look, I may have trouble coming back in. And I spoke with a group of attorneys that dealt with all of that, and they gave me the complete process, which was a huge envelope filled with papers. And he said, use that as a last resort. And he said, if all fails, here's my phone number. And when I got back, I didn't come back to the airport I normally use because of travel arrangements. And I showed my passport. He asked me the standard questions. I knew the standard answers. Everything was going fine. Picked up the stamp. His arm went down. He couldn't stop it. He stamped. And then he looked and he saw the date that my visa was going to expire. He looked at it, really upset. He looked at me and he said, your visa expires in 5 days. And I said, yes. And I was about to get my and this, that, and the other. He literally got my passport. He looked at me and said, get it renewed or get out. And he threw it at me. He didn't give it to me. He threw it at me. I had to pick it from the floor. I thanked him very much, sir. And I walked through. And maybe what he was expecting is that I would become confrontational and I would be dragged into the little room. Next thing I know, I would find myself back in the UK, having to visit the US, trying to sort my mess out with my boss upset with me because why haven't you come back? So, and there's many, many more like this. And then in a contrast, in the Middle East, I would just walk through, whereas other Middle Easterns from other countries, not the one that I was walking in, would get treated really harsh. And I just couldn't understand what was that about. Well, I should be treated harsh. I'm the odd one. And I never really understood that. And flying into one of the Emirates one day, I came from India with a plane that was filled with construction workers and me. And when we got to immigration, everybody ran to immigration. I was at the back of the line. When I finally got to the front, the young girl that was there as an immigration officer, she looked at me and she looked at my passport and says, where have you come from? And I said, Mumbai. Next thing that comes in is really appalling. She turned to me and said, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, no, it's okay. And then she said, you shouldn't have stood there at the back. You should have waved at me. We would have brought you to the front. And I said, well, no, it's all right. It's fine. I was at the back of the plane. I was the last one out. It's okay. So as you can see, it flies all over the place. And yes, I have many, many experiences and I empathize with people, and I've seen it in especially the Middle East, how the construction workers, which are mostly Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, how the living conditions they have, how they get treated, it's really, really, really appalling. And yes, there you could then frame it under the concept of yes, I'm somebody being an emirate, I'm privileged, more privileged than anybody else that walks this world because I bathe in money, I drink gold, and act that way. Yes, it is hard. I really don't have an answer to how could something be done to work this, and I think the only way around it is people have to be able to sit in front of each other and really speak their minds out without feeling that, you know, that you can't do that. You have to be able to do that. I have seen things work both ways and in very, very appalling ways. And yes, when you are in somebody else's country, you fall under that category that you're at the receiving end. And I think places like this is good. If we are all, just spell it out, say it as you feel it.
That's exactly the purpose of tonight and for this space as well. No, thank you very much, James, for sharing that. And there was a couple of moments, you know, I wasn't alone in my shock, you know, at how somebody can be treated on such a, you know, a stereotypical way. You know, I think that's it, stereotypes, isn't it? And what they're assuming based on travel destinations and these types of things. Rosie, I don't know if you wanted to come in there. I noticed you took off your mic.
No, I think that, you know, just referring to the interpreter, because it's what I do. And it's basically, I have been doing that for over 60 years. So I will say that here, unfortunately, they don't take like interpretation and translation service serious. They don't really think that you need to be, you know, certified or you need to be, you know, entitled to do that, because very often it's about cost, and that cost nobody wants to handle. That it's the big issue about. In my universe, in the place that I work, there is like a case that is very famous here in UK, that it's called the Begun case. And if people wanted to research, it's about a woman that she was convicted here in UK, in Scotland, in Edinburgh, for a crime that she never committed because of a mistranslation. She was a Muslim woman, and she got a translator that didn't spoke her language to translate her in court. And he mistranslated manslaughter. And she was in prison for many years, until a moment that someone managed to get her out. And she was such a shame about everything that happened with her, that she committed suicide after that. So even though have like this case that move and shake it off everything here, you will still have like companies or organizations that use individuals to translate it for other people that don't have the ability to do that, and can mistranslate it, or even do worst, advocate it on behalf, or change the way that the person is trying to talk or to explain their story. So I think that the capitalism that we live here, and the way that people think that this is a cost, and it's a cost that maybe is not worth. Very often, I am from Brazil, and my mother language is Portuguese. How many times people think that, oh, okay, you speak Spanish, so you can translate it for a Spanish? No, and I am married with an Italian. I live in Italy. I speak Italian. I don't interpret for Italian citizens. It's just because language, it's about so many layers. It's your identity. It's about your culture. It's about what you are as essential. And to know the cultural differences, you needed to understand the mind of the person that you are, interpret for. I think that 2-3 years ago, we had this conversation in the office with Savinit. I remember that me, you, and her, we were talking about the origin of your language, and coming like about words that are Indian words or Hindu words that are like from your dialect. So all these things, there's so much there to be, and we're supposed to have, I'm not sure about the home office, because I thought that the home office will use just professional translators, but working in the health service and in the social service, how many times I heard doctors or even like, social workers, okay, they speak a little English, that will be fine, we can't like handle. And basically the person is a struggle, or even more, you go to criminal justice and you were charged for something, but you speak a little English, that it's fine. So you don't need, and how you know what kind of offense you committed and why you committed that? Because some of the times, most of the times I will say it's misunderstandings, because in their country that thing was allowed, and in this country the thing it's not allowed. There is like even something that I usually to say to everyone: when you arrive in the airport here in UK, you don't receive a manual that will tell you how to live here, how the law plays here. And we needed to thinking that there is like different levels of educations, different levels of migrants, as we are saying all here. So there is people that will research about the country that they are about to move, and they will try to get as much information that they can to don't get in trouble. And there is the ones that just put the bag on their shoulders and just move, and they learn in the hard way. Unfortunately, they face so many issues. Members of their own community that will give false informations to them, and they will take advantages of the ones who doesn't speak English fluent or doesn't understand what has been said. So I think that you know, the government needed to look in the interpretation and translation service with like a proper eye and give it the proper support. And as Numar say, don't shout with people that English is not the first language. We are not deaf, you know, we can't like understand what you're saying in normal voice, probably. Or we cannot understand at all, and you shout it will not help it, we just make even worse.
No, thanks for that, Rosalda. And yeah, and it brings me on actually, you know, and I see that in the chat as well, people are picking up on your point you mentioned about the manual, right? And the disparity perhaps in terms of where somebody's coming from and where they're at now, and in terms of the differences in laws and these types of things. And kind of leading from that, and again, a question to everyone, but do you think there is enough resources or enough support for migrants who have intersectional identities? What I mean by that is, of course, you know, we're all so many things. So you may also be a migrant who is also female, or who is also BIPOC, or is also LGBT. Do you think there's enough support that takes into account all of those levels of identity?
I'll just quickly answer that, if I may. And the answer is no. And I'll give the example of being an ethnic minority and LGBT+, just as a specific example. So there are challenges, of course, of being an ethnic minority, and we've touched upon those. There are challenges of being LGBT+. Now, ironically, I come from a country where being LGBT+ is a criminal offense. However, when I lived in Pakistan, I was very happy. I confess I was very happy. But the cruel irony is I didn't realize what I was missing till I came in the UK. Then I realized what freedom was, what it meant. Sometimes we don't realize what we've been missing until we've been handed it for free in some sense. And people assume that, you know, being LGBT+, you know, often it is so westernized, it is so anglicized, you know, there is, just as that specific example is, you know, even within the LGBT+ community is, most of our ideologies, global ideologies, are very westernized. And then as someone who has experienced what that's like, both in the East and the West, I realize that a lot of individuals within the LGBT+ community who haven't integrated here in the UK is because there is a great deal of, you look like me, you act like me, I will gravitate towards you. You know, and I won't make the effort to try to interact with someone who doesn't look like me or think like me, because that's effort. Why should I do that? You know, my resources are scarce. Just, you know, that's one specific example. And that it's a real challenge, which is once again why community groups like Glitter Cymru are so important, where we're saying, look, you know, let's try to help you, you know, work this through. So the value of community level activism to fund community level groups to help people integrate within the UK, and indeed anywhere in the world, really. I think that's so important.
I don't know if I can put like a positive spin on this like this topic we're talking about, because I didn't realize how I would say privileged I was living in Malaysia until I came to the UK for very various reasons, because it is, I would say I'm the 4th generation Chinese living in Malaysia, and the Malaysian demographics is basically about most people are Malays. There's a lot of indigenous peoples in Malaysia as well, and then there's about 7% Indian, and there's 20-something% Chinese in Malaysia. And so the funny thing is, because we've been living there for over 3 generations, then it's like everybody's cultures is integrated together, and we have one of the world's most public holidays in the world to do with celebrations. So such as Diwali is a public holiday, Chinese New Year is a public holiday, Christmas is a public holiday, Eid and Ramadan, which is like, yeah, the Muslim fasting, is a holiday as well. So it's like everybody in the island where I live in, on one street there is a mosque, and then you walk 5 meters, there's a Buddhist temple, and you walk another 5 meters, there is a Sikh temple, and then a Hindu quill, and then Catholic Church at the very end. So I took it for granted, like everybody's just living in harmony. It's just generations and generations of, we would say, immigrants, like coming from, China for doing business, India to come as rubber tappers, even the Jawa people from Indonesia, Javanese people from Indonesia, settling in and integrating their language. That's why Malay is sort of, 90% to do with Indonesian language as well. So we understand Indonesian due to all these little culture integrations. And so I think because of living dynamically, culturally, and racially unified in my country, that's why even for resources, as we are talking about, even for resources for tourists which come into my country, there's like translations in Japanese, in lots of European languages. So maybe one page there's like Italian, there's like German, and it's all translated in the same page. So I think I think this is one big different spin which not many people in the world know about, because Malaysia is kind of like a small country, but I would like to kind of share it to the world, where I believe that even though maybe migration it's kind of sets a barrier between the people who are living in the country itself and people who just came to the country. I think after, years and years of settling in, I think in the future there would be a possibility where, cultures are just like integrated, assimilated together. And it is possible because coming from a country which cultures have been assimilated and everybody's celebrating everything, everybody's respecting everybody's cultures. Of course, there's a few minorities who are just like, get back to China, get back to India. But generally, everybody celebrates everything. And I want to get that word out there that, even if you're a migrant, there is a possibility that, if such as if you're in the country for quite a long time and there's a community of you all, then there will be this assimilation and there will be this resource that that will be put together positively if there is like a substantial work on aspect.
Thank you very much for that. And yeah, it brings me on to my next point, because I'm conscious of time. But it's exactly that, what are your ambitions? Zhaohui, you were very clear on your ambition there. And I certainly echo it, a place where everyone is welcomed, and that can certainly be strived for. And I think Scotland's hoping to strive for that. And hopefully one day we will achieve that. But in the meantime, I'm very keen to hear from you all, and perhaps due to time, we'll maybe just go around one by one. And I'll just ask you if you can, in one sentence, just explain what your ambition for the future would be. And we'll begin with Ivan.
My personal ambition, I guess, yeah. Well, I have to think about it, I think. Yes, I'm not sure. I want to be here for a bit longer in Scotland, as and see, the place, the country. I want to see where the Brexit where goes in the next few years, and because it's already it's done, and there is no going back, and I just hope that takes the right direction. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks for that, Ivan. Mujib.
As my greatest ambition, although we're speaking about migration today, I don't know if some of you can sense it. A lot of what we're talking about tends to connect to discrimination, inequality, and racism. So I've always thought the solution to racism, first, especially racism that affects my community, which is people with darker skin coming from African continent. I think the solution mainly is in the motherland, which is in Africa. is the motherland. So even though if people start thinking about their heritage, even though you've migrated, you now a resident of somewhere else, you now, you there's a fact, it's an historical fact that you migrated or have an heritage from this place. So if people start thinking about that and start asking why questions, they'll start thinking of making their better. Why I mentioned this because I like the idea of migration, people moving from here to there for better places or just for experience of something different. I would like my country, Nigeria, to be somewhere where people will migrate to. So that's one of my greatest ambition. So let's be having discussion in Nigeria 20, 30 years time to say, oh, okay, in the world view, there's immigration problem. Okay, how many percent of my immigrants can Nigeria take? Whether white, mixed, colored, whatever. That's my ambition. That's my ambition.
I have to say it's an unfair question, of course, because there's so much going on in my mind, but I'll try to be pithy. My ambition is to lead a life that is aimed at learning and spreading the awareness that I gain through learning from others and just through my personal journeys. It's not enough to learn. It is essential to share that knowledge and try to make a difference. And there are various ways of doing that. I know it's quite vague, but you have to go through life learning and trying to pass on that information as we're doing today. So being part of these sort of endeavors, absolutely essential.
Thank you, Numair. And next on my screen is James.
Well, at my age, well, my ambition, well, I think I've accomplished quite a bit of what I set myself to at the beginning, and I have missed opportunities like I believe everybody else. I don't think anybody could claim at the end of their life or 3/4 away on one's life that I'm fulfilled. I've got everything I need. As I said, I all over the place, and the first time that we came to Scotland was early 90s, and my 3 children were born here in Aberdeen, and they became travelers like myself, and I think they understand this nomad style of living. My older one now is in Sweden, and they operate a bicycle co-op delivery system in Sweden. His girlfriend is Bulgarian. He speaks near 7 languages, and he probably would be a much better person to be sitting here rather than myself. But I think that right now, personally, in a very, very individual context, I hope that I can finally live my end days here in Scotland, which is a place that I managed to be very fond of. Everybody says, well, you're from Brazil. What's possibly wrong with you? What on earth? Leave Brazil to go live in Scotland? And what life has taught me is that the place that you're at has very little to do with the place, but it has a lot to do with the people you know. And I have made many, many good friends here. And I think there are other places where I also found, made many, many good friends. But here, one of the things I like photography, and it's one of the pearls of the world for light and taking landscape photography. And it just fulfills. And we have quite a group of pretty diverse friends from many different places and English also. And there was one thing I was thinking when everybody was speaking. I was looking at every image, and if all of you, maybe with Davy's exception, I'll make an exception for it. But if you all went to Brazil and you just showed up on the street, you're all Brazilian, without a shadow of a doubt. Nobody would ever. But Davy, yeah, nah. Yeah, Rosilda agrees. She's and that probably taught me quite a bit about different people, different cultures, where you're from, how you behave, and maybe helped me a lot when I did all my traveling and working with people. I think I've worked with, well, maybe I'm not going to say every single nationality, that would be pushing it, but every single continent, dead easy. I've worked from people from every continent of the planet. I've experienced stories, and I've in that aspect, it's fulfilled. I've enjoyed that, but I would say that I hope that everything always strives for the best. That differences between cultures, religion, gender, all of that gets pushed behind. It's most of it's pointless. Anybody that engages in harnessing and poking, you're seriously wasting your life doing something like that. I don't have the answer of how, but yes, and I believe that I try my best to do it. I feel that wherever I've been through, I've been able to harness respect, and I think that's the key point. If you can hit that little tone of respect, and then you're more than halfway there. The rest of it is just be yourself.
Thank you very much for that, James. I think within all of us, there's a sense of migration, but perhaps, yes, I don't know if I would look like I belonged in Brazil. Yeah, perhaps not. I'd probably like the tan, though, nonetheless.
Well, I think that everybody says so much beautiful things. I will say that James said everything. I really wish that here one day become as Brazil, that we can see each other is just as, this mix of cultures, because it's what will happen. We already see in the streets people getting married with different nationalities. We need to embrace, the differences. Different is good. And I think that it's what we need to just emphasize. It's to stop and listen to each other, listen all these wonderful stories that sometimes are tough, are sad, but that it's what will bring us to reflect on how to be better human beings. Because by essence, the color of our skin, our sexual options, or, where we come from, doesn't matter. It's how we treated each other and how we can live and sustain together. I think that COVID-19 already brought us this big thing, because we needed to be together to beat, this invisible enemy that it's outside there. So I really hope that for today, from these conversations, and maybe even have others, because you need to have a safe environment that people are not afraid to ask questions or to, be silly, because that is how we learn as a human being, and it's just to try to incorporate it. And maybe as I think I don't want to pronounce her name wrong, but I think that Jiwi, your dream, it's the most perfect thing, try to harmonize the whole world and forget about. I think that I remember when I was in the university on 2000, and people were talking about globalization, and it was something that everybody wanted. And now when people talk about migration, seems like too off about these two universes. First of all, you wanted people to be globalized, and now you wanted people to stay in their places because you don't want it. So I really hope that, people can just think and reflect about their actions and try to be better and listen to each other. So.
Thank you very, very much for that, and a fine point to end on, and certainly round off as well with linking in with Xiaowei's dream as well, which sounds the dream of everyone on the conversation tonight, actually, which is a nice thought. Hopefully one day we'll get there. But I'd like to thank everyone for giving your time and being here with us tonight. I've certainly learned so much. And we've got some comments coming into the chat as well, thanking everyone. And honestly, sincerely, I do. I'm so grateful to you all to be here. And I hope that, if anything, having such a diverse group of people all talking here tonight, it's reassuring that perhaps we will get to a society one day where we won't see difference as a bad thing, but rather difference is always a good thing. So no, thank you all very much. And thank you to all of our audience members. A few of them dropped off, but certainly thank you all for coming nonetheless. And good night.
Thank you.